which finds, if I
you label it as terrorist.
Well, an organisation which fulfills every...
Come off it.
Well, I don't know what else you call an organisation which has killed hundreds of it.
What was the Irgun? What was the Haganah?
Well, the Irgun and the Haganah are not operating at the moment.
No, but what were they?
Well, they were terrorist organisations at the time. But I would say that we're talking about what's happening at the present.
Expecting a David and Goliath struggle. What do you expect in a David and Goliath struggle?
That is an organisation that has no respect for human lives, not Palestinian lives and not Israeli security. And if the Arab world really cares about the Palestinian peoples, why doesn't it do something for them practical instead of whining about this tiny slither of land which Israel occupies? Why don't they realise that if there's going to be peace in the region, it relies on there being a Palestinian solution and there relies on there being an Israeli solution?
Douglas Murray delivers a scathing takedown of an enraged Muslim professor in one of the most intense debates yet on the Hamas-Israel conflict. With fierce precision, Murray dismantles every attempt to justify Hamas's ruthless violence, exposing the shocking contradictions in the professor's arguments. It's a fiery exchange that leaves no doubt about the brutality of Hamas's actions and why Murray's logic hits hard. Stick around for a debate that's as explosive as it is revealing.
I mean, Barack Obama said this. He said, if someone was sending rockets into my house, where my two daughters sleep at night, I'm going to do everything in my power to stop that, and I would expect Israelis to do the same thing.
I mean, that's quite true, but the point is we need to understand how the situation has come about. We seem obsessed with the current situation. We need to understand how Israel came into being. You know, we can debate here from now until doomsday about what's happening today, but we need to understand what has created the situation. How many of us know about the Hussein McMahon correspondence? How many of us know about the Sykes-Picot Agreement? How many of us know about the Balfour Declaration? All of them are duplicitous agreements that brought about the state of Israel.
But we are where we are.
Yeah, and to call Hamas a terrorist organization, what is the Stalag, the Irgun and the Haganah? How many of us know this? You see, we only know one side of the narrative. It's easy for people to say that Hamas is a terrorist organization, yet they were democratically elected. I might not like them. In fact, I don't agree with Hamas a lot of the time, but I cannot say they're just terrorists. How come one person's terrorist and another person's freedom fighter?
This Muslim professor rightly highlights the importance of understanding the historical context behind Israel's creation, citing agreements like Sykes-Picot and the Balfour Declaration. These events undeniably shaped the grievances felt in the region. However, even from an Islamic perspective, these past injustices do not justify acts of violence against civilians. Islam emphasizes justice, mercy, and the sanctity of innocent lives. Acknowledging this history matters, yet we must hold all actions to ethical standards. Hamas's indiscriminate attacks harm not only Israelis, but Palestinians as well, undermining peace and the principles of justice.
Andrew Murray?
Well, it's not the case that they're freedom fighters. The first thing that Hamas did when they were allegedly elected was to kill their co-religionists in the Gaza, was to throw people off buildings, to shoot people in the back when they're running away. This is what the Hamas do to their own co-religionists in the Gaza, to other Palestinians. So the first thing is that Hamas not only inflicts terror on the people of Israel, they also inflict it on other Palestinians. It's for the Palestinian peoples, as the rabbi said, to try to overthrow this terrorist organization. An organization which fights, if I may just finish. Well, an organisation which fulfills every...
Come off it.
Well, I don't know what else you call an organisation which has killed hundreds of it.
What was the Irgun? What was the Haganah?
Well, the Irgun and the Haganah are not operating at the moment.
No, but what were they?
Well, they were terrorist organisations at the time. But I would say that we're talking about what's happening at the present. And the present situation is that Israel builds bunkers in which its civilians have to shelter from rocket fire from the Hamas. The Hamas builds bunkers and hides its rockets in it, and then puts civilians on top of those bunkers. That is a terrorist organisation.
That is an organisation. What do you expect in a David and Goliath struggle?
That is an organisation that has no respect for human lives, not Palestinian lives and not Israeli lives.
F-16s?
Mahmoud,
This fiery debate touches on deeply complex issues surrounding the conflict, highlighting differing perspectives on accountability, civilian protection, and the broader implications of actions by both Hamas and Israel. One side argues that Hamas's tactics compromise civilian safety in Gaza, while the other emphasizes the historical grievances that contribute to current tensions. Both perspectives reveal the underlying challenges in addressing the humanitarian concerns on both sides and underscore the difficulty of finding solutions in such a polarized and historically charged conflict. So, lasting peace is required for both accountability and a nuanced understanding of each side's lived realities.
You, Andrew earlier, and I apologise for that. You have the stature of a tennis player, clearly. But how can this do anything but strengthen the Hamas position, not only in the region, but across the whole Arab world? They've all of a sudden, look at the march yesterday with thousands of people there. Well, with Hamas, I think it was 12,000 people. Hamas posters, people like Alexei Sayle and Annie Lennox marching alongside people with Hamas posters. And all of a sudden, they're sort of heroic freedom fighters.
Really?
They've been strengthened.
You think Hamas or Annie Lennox become heroic freedom fighters, or Alexei Sayle needs to tell you what's right and wrong in the world?
Your problem is this. If I may interject just a moment, your problem is this: that the very, very foolish and unbalanced ideas, a gentleman over there enunciated one of them just now, that Israel in this conflict is Goliath and the Arabs are David, when Israel in fact has about 2% of the land mass of the Middle East and about the same population. This idea that Israel is the aggressive bully is created in the public mind. This war is not going to be won by rockets. It's not going to be won by tanks. It's being won or lost on the television screens of the world. If Israel loses the support of the peoples of Europe and North America, which is in grave danger of doing, then Israel will lose the war.
Douglas Murray.
When Israel risks, like in 2006, having 1 million of its civilians having to live under threat of rocket fire, this is something which should be beyond its concern about what European governments think or don't think. You mentioned earlier about the huge number of civilian casualties. I can't think of another situation in war in which a fifth of casualties are civilian, and in which the Hamas have suffered up till now perhaps as many as 400 casualties. 400 terrorists being killed seems to me to be good work. It's good work for the future.
Murray's remarks highlight a critical aspect of the Israel-Gaza conflict: the significant influence of public perception and media portrayal on international support for Israel. By pointing out the disparity in landmass and population, he challenges the prevailing narrative that frames Israel as the sole aggressor. This perspective is essential in understanding the complexities of the situation. However, it is equally important to address the humanitarian consequences, including civilian casualties, which cannot be overlooked. A comprehensive view of the conflict must balance the geopolitical realities with the tragic human costs, fostering a nuanced understanding of the ongoing struggle.
Of Israel, it's good work for the future of the region.
Upwards of 75 children have been killed. You can't call them terrorists.
No, I didn't call them terrorists. I said they were innocent civilians. But that 4 times that number of people being killed, the targeted people being killed, are terrorists, and they have been killed. And that can only be good for the region. It can only be good for Israeli security. And if the Arab world really cares about the Palestinian peoples, why doesn't it do something for them practical? Instead of whining about this tiny slither of land which Israel occupies, why don't they realize that if there's going to be peace in the region, it relies on there being a Palestinian solution, and it relies on there being an Israeli solution. That can happen, but the first thing that has to happen is that the Arab governments and the Palestinians realize that Israel isn't going anywhere. If they made that realization, why would they be firing rockets into Israel proper? This isn't disputed territory. They're firing rockets into Israel. Why are they doing that?
The call for a transformative understanding of the Israel-Palestine conflict resonates with urgency and complexity. It urges a collective awakening among the Arab world and Palestinians to accept the reality of Israel's enduring presence in the region. Rather than lingering in a cycle of complaints, there's a push for innovative solutions that pave the way for peace. Framing the removal of individuals labeled as terrorists as a step toward greater security opens a dialogue about the delicate balance between safety and humanity. Yet, the need to dig deep into the roots of this conflict remains vital. True resolution can only blossom when all voices are heard, and the intricate tapestry of history and identity is respected.
We have to look at the root causes of this recent conflict. It didn't start on the 27th of December when the rockets started flying and the eruption of this recent conflict. We have 6 months of siege and blockade over Gaza. People are starving in Gaza. Starvation by Israel, blockading supplies of food, medical aids, and everything to Gaza. There is a 41 years of occupation. Palestinians are not allowed to have their freedom. Israel withdrew from the Gaza, from the settlements, but it continues its occupation of the Gaza Strip
Emphasizing the need to examine the root causes of the recent conflict highlights the importance of understanding the historical and ongoing struggles faced by the Palestinian people. The mention of the long-standing blockade and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza sheds light on the dire conditions that contribute to the cycle of violence. Recognizing that the conflict is not merely a recent phenomenon, but the result of decades of occupation and restrictions on freedom is crucial for framing any meaningful dialogue. The call for freedom and basic human rights resonates with universal principles of justice and dignity, reinforcing the idea that lasting peace can only be achieved by addressing these underlying grievances and striving for a just resolution for all parties involved.
During the Troubles, of course, perhaps a better analogy would have been flattening or bombing the Catholic parts of Derry. We never did that, did we?
No, but we sent in troops. We had areas where we had famous mistakes by the British Army during the Northern Ireland Troubles. This is, however, not at all similar. However, this is not at all similar to the situation in Northern Ireland, and the president just doesn't work. The IRA were not an elected organisation, as Hamas claimed to be at the moment.
They had massive support.
They didn't fire rockets into mainland Britain with the continuity that the Hamas did. The Hamas have effectively ministries in the Gaza. They have arms dumps in the Gaza. If we had been able to identify similar arms dumps in the IRA's times, if the IRA had the munitions that the Hamas do now, we would have done anything similar to what Israel has done.
They killed more people. But they killed more people with massive atrocities on the British mainland than Hamas have managed with rockets over 10 years.
Hamas have killed hundreds of people through suicide bombings and sending in suicide bombs. This is why the security fence has been needed.
Well, the IRA killed thousands of people.
If I just may add, there is also just a fundamental misunderstanding about making IRA comparison, which is the IRA never had as its charter obligations the annihilation of the British state. That is what Hamas is in its charter dedicated to, the annihilation of Israel. Not the negotiation, not an issue over particular borders, but the annihilation of Israel. That's why it's sending rockets into mainland.
These remarks draw attention to the complexities of comparing the current Israel-Hamas conflict with the historical situation in Northern Ireland. Featuring Hamas as an elected organization with a stated goal of eliminating Israel presents a different dynamic than the IRA did in their struggle, raising important considerations about the nature of militant groups and their objectives. The necessity of security measures in response to ongoing threats is highlighted, indicating a perceived need for defensive actions like the security fence. This analysis points to specific historical and operational differences between the two conflicts, inviting further discussion on the broader implications of such comparisons and the unique challenges each situation presents. Ultimately, this perspective underscores the importance of context in understanding the motivations and actions of involved parties in any conflict.
We've had this debate, but not once have we called it what it is. We talked about Islamism, we talked about Hamas, but we don't talk about Zionists. I mean, what is Zionism? Do we people know Zionism is a political ideology? It's not the same as Judaism. We need to separate the two. We also need to understand that to be anti-Israeli is not to be anti-Semitic. The two are totally, vastly different. They're not linked at whatsoever. We also need to see the parallel between what happened in the Warsaw Ghetto and what happening in Gaza today. I mean, that is the parallel we need to see. We need to understand.
The perspective presented underscores the necessity of distinguishing between political ideologies and religious identities, particularly regarding Zionism and Judaism. This separation is crucial for fostering a more nuanced understanding of the Israel-Palestine conflict. By emphasizing that criticism of Israel does not equate to anti-Semitism, it opens the door for constructive dialogue about the complexities of the situation without resorting to harmful stereotypes. Drawing parallels between historical events, such as the Warsaw Ghetto and the current conditions in Gaza, serves to evoke empathy and highlight the humanitarian crisis facing Palestinians today. This analogy invites a critical examination of the impact of occupation and blockades, encouraging a conversation that prioritizes human rights and dignity. Ultimately, advocating for a clear distinction between ideologies while addressing historical injustices can contribute to a more informed and compassionate discourse on the conflict. This explosive debate shatters the surface of the Israel-Palestine conflict, diving deep into the historical grievances and moral complexities that fuel the fire on both sides. Douglas Murray's fierce defense of Israel challenges the prevailing narratives, while his opponents passionately highlight the humanitarian crises faced by Palestinians. With fiery exchanges and stark contrasts, the discussion demands attention, igniting a critical examination of ideology versus reality. It's a call to action for all involved, to confront the harsh truths, seek genuine understanding, and pave the way for a future where justice and humanity triumph over division.